Hello, this is the Happy Families podcast. What if everything that we think that we know about mental health education in schools is wrong? What if the mindfulness sessions, the CBT exercises and the wellbeing lessons that are now mandatory in classrooms across the country are not just failing our kids, but are actually making some of them worse? Well, it's not actually mandatory, but a lot of schools are making it essentially mandatory. The wellbeing movement is in full swing in education. Today, we're diving into the explosive new research that's turning the mental health education world upside down. We're going to explore why a leading Oxford psychologist says we need to stop these universal mental health lessons immediately, what the evidence really shows about their effectiveness, and what this means for Australian parents whose kids are sitting through these classes right now. Stay with us. Hello and welcome to a Doctor's Desk episode of the Happy Families podcast, where you get real parenting solutions every day. We are Justin and Kylie Coulson. This is the most downloaded parenting podcast in Australia. How awesome is that? Dr. Lucy Folkes is an academic psychologist at the University of Oxford who researches mental health and social development in adolescents and is the author of What Mental Illness Really Is. And she's arguing that universal mental health lessons in schools should be stopped immediately. Kylie, initial reactions when you hear this, given that everybody is talking a lot about mental health, it's in the ether, it's in the atmosphere in 2025.
My head is going in so many different directions at the moment. I think about how simplistic school was in the beginning of time,
right,
where teachers were teaching arithmetic and English, punctuation and alphabets.
The 3 R's, reading, writing, arithmetic.
Yeah, and what we're now expecting of our teachers. You think about a psychologist, you've done a 4-year degree, but in order for you to be qualified as a psychologist, a practicing clinical psychologist, you would have needed to do another 2 years of clinical practice.
Minimum. And many have done other stuff. They've done doctoral dissertations and that kind of thing as well. Yeah.
Right. But we're asking teachers who do a 3-year teaching degree.
I think it's 4. It's 4.
To then step in and be not only an expert in maths and English, but all things to do with mental health and, kind of life skills. It just is so much. So my head is definitely kind of just reeling with the magnitude of what we're expecting of our teachers. But then secondly, I'm really curious to know why she's saying that that these things need to stop, because from personal experience, we've got a daughter going through grade 12 at the moment, and her school is adamant that the lessons that they're putting on for her well-being essentially are going to make the biggest difference to her, and she's actually cowering away from them. They're not something that she feels are a positive experience for her.
So as somebody who's done a PhD, which meant that I did the 4 years of undergrad psych, including the honours year, and then I did the PhD, and then I became a university lecturer for a couple of years, I can tell you categorically that it how do I say this politely? It concerns me. It concerns me that school educators who are just if there's one line that really upsets me, it's the line, "It's not my job." It's not my job. And yet when I look at mental health instruction, I just don't think it's a teacher's job to be doing it. It doesn't fit for me because this is a specialised area. It's an area of really distinct qualification that's required. As it is, I think that so many mental health professionals are not even up to the job. And
I was about to say that. I can't tell you how many conversations I've had with people who've been talking to their therapists and they've shared something with me and I'm like, they said what?
Yeah. Yeah. The mental health industrial complex is alive and well. And I think, well, let's talk about what Dr. Lucy Folkes has to say about it and why this matters. And I'm just going to add my commentary in and around it. So there's 3 central reasons that she highlights that it needs to stop. And I'll tell you whether I think she's right and wrong and where this sits for me. But I think mostly I'm in agreement with it, which is why I'm bringing it up. And bear in mind, I go into schools and do mental health education. Right, that is part of what I do. And so I am making an exception for people like myself and Dr. Lucy Folkes. But I'll explain why as we go. Vested interest and all that.
Exceptions to the rule.
Yeah. Okay, so number one, the evidence shows that these programs don't work. Where do we start here? So I remember when I was doing my doctoral dissertation back in the 2000s, like 2007 through to 10 or something like that. And there was this big hoo-ha happening because Martin Seligman, who is the demigod, the doyen of all things positive psychology, was out there flogging his book Flourish after he'd written Authentic Happiness. I quite liked Authentic Happiness. I felt like Flourish was a great big sales spiel, basically, and it didn't really tell us anything. And there was this research project that he'd run with another researcher, Karen Rivich, and a couple of others. And I don't want to get into the weeds too much, but basically they're touting the incredible impact that it's had on the well-being of these 15-year-old school students. But everywhere I looked, I couldn't find the program. It was not available for peer review. It hadn't been written up. It hadn't been published. The research around it was skint. At the same time, he went into the US military and was doing this comprehensive mental fitness for soldiers stuff to avoid post-traumatic stress disorder. But there was no research published. And of course, it's in the military, so they didn't want to get the secrets out there. But all of the research that was being done, you couldn't find it anywhere. There was no peer-reviewed research. And the more I did my PhD in this area of positive psychology, the more I became skeptical of it. And the more I found that the interventions were being touted as world-changing and life-changing and world-leading and all these things. And yet I'd look at the stats, I'd look at the methodology, I'd look at the participants, and I just had these big questions. Like, I don't think positive psychology is living up to the promise. So Dr. Lucy Folks has had a look at it herself and basically said, and I'm sort of quoting here, well, I'm paraphrasing, high quality research demonstrates that universal school mental health interventions produce no improvement in mental health symptoms, and some studies show they actually increase symptoms and cause other negative outcomes.
Without reading, her manuscript, her research, and sitting in the place that I sit, I always get nervous about wanting to educate the wider community on all of the symptoms and challenges that one can experience, because in doing so, we highlight all the things that are possible, and all of a sudden we have a whole group of teenage kids who start self-diagnosing.
Yeah. And TikTok
start
only
ruminating
yep.
over, oh, that sounds like me, I've got that. And the reality is all of the symptoms, we each experience them at some point in our lives. We go through stages where we have these, down times where we really struggle. We ruminate over hard situations and hard conversations, and then we start, kind of thinking negative thoughts. And we all go through the.
You've used the key word, stages. When I was growing up, the key word that my parents would often say is, "Oh, they're just going through a stage." But we don't say that. We don't say that anymore. People aren't going through stages and phases anymore. They're getting diagnosed, and I believe I want to really tread gently here, because I recognize we're on very, very sensitive ground. Overwhelmingly, though, the more we talk about these issues, the more people start to dwell on, ruminate, investigate, step into, and even accept labels and say, well, I'm going to stick this label on myself. I still hold the line that as a general rule, with only very few exceptions, labels belong on jars, not people. And the more we step into this, the more it becomes part of our identity. And once it becomes part of our identity, I'm an anxious person, for example, it's harder and harder to shake that. It's like, okay, I'm not going through a phase anymore. This is going to become an ingrained component of who I am. So that's, to me, a big red flag. And the more we talk about mental health in schools and to kids, the more possibility, and certainly the research bears it out, the mental health industrial complex is winning here, and more people are being diagnosed, going to see counsellors, going to see psychologists, going to see specialists of one kind or another, because of all of the challenges that we're becoming increasingly aware of. And the definition of what counts as anxiety or post-traumatic stress or depression or whatever keeps on expanding. It becomes more inclusive, because we want anyone who's experiencing any kind of suffering or trauma to make sure that they are being seen and heard and labeled where appropriate. So this is her first big, I guess, challenge to the mental health industry and to schools generally about pumping out the well-being stuff, which, I mean, I've been at the forefront of for years, and I'm not anymore. I've really pulled back from it. I have concerns around it.
It's interesting, because the more we talk about this, the more I am aware of the moments in my life, moments in time where I have experienced anxiety. And as I get older, I actually think that I experience it a whole heap more than I did as a younger person, with all the different facets to life and being a mum and looking after children and worrying about them and just the different places and spaces that I find myself in. But I don't ever think, oh, I'm a person with anxiety. I think I'm a person who's experiencing
anxiety.
And
that's adaptive, right? That's how it's supposed to be. One of the challenges when it comes to anxiety is we actually shared a meme about a month ago on Facebook where we said, what could possibly go wrong? My anxiety. I'm glad you asked. Yeah. Right. And so that's the difference between adaptive versus maladaptive, or healthy versus unhealthy anxiety. After the break, I want to talk about the two other reasons that Dr. Lucy Folks says we've got to stop mental health education instruction in schools immediately. That's coming up in just a sec on the Happy Families podcast. Stay with us. Dr. Lucy Folks, the author of the book, What Mental Illness Really is making a strong and provocative critique, saying that we are talking about mental health too much in schools and it's not serving our children well. In fact, the evidence shows, number one, that these programs don't work, and number two, it doesn't work because of the one-size-fits-all program or approach. So let me step through this with you, Kylie. In any classroom, you're going to find that most students don't have mental health problems, which makes lessons irrelevant. I remember I was asked to speak at a school about the topic of anxiety. And I said, okay, who am I going to be speaking with? And they said, all of grade 11. How many students do you have? We have 300 students in grade 11. And I said, so one of the challenges I'm going to have as a keynote speaker is I'm going to speak about anxiety to 300 students, and probably at absolute tops, 100 of them are going to be struggling with anxiety. Just when you look at the numbers, somewhere around 100. It could be a touch more, but it's likely to be less, particularly given the demographics of this particular school. So we're going to have a whole lot of kids now start to worry about whether they should be worried. They're going to be anxious about whether they do or don't have anxiety. And they're also, they're going to be sitting there thinking, I could be doing other things other than sitting here and listening to a talk that has nothing to do with what I'm going through in my life.
And you're going to have a whole heap of kids who are going to hear something that you say and then ruminate over that and worry and get more anxious about it.
Which goes back to point number one.
But then you're also going to have a whole heap of kids who are going to sit there and go, what the heck would he know?
Yeah. So fortunately, I gave a really great talk and I made sure that I accounted for all of those issues, and nobody ended up with anxiety because they were listening to my talk. From what I understand, we got great feedback on the talk, and it was engaging enough that everyone who didn't have anxiety was still able to benefit from it, because it was more about strategies for helping us to just regulate our emotions, which is quite beneficial, especially when you're hearing it from the right person. But I really want to emphasize this. When you have this one-size-fits-all program, most students don't have mental health problems. Those who do have serious issues do not need this global approach. They need targeted one-to-one support. They don't want this light touch kind of...
Well, you're almost diluting the message, right? So it kind of will fit everybody across the board.
And when you say everybody, we're not just... We've got to include the neurodivergent kids. We've got to include kids that come from diverse cultural backgrounds. We know that issues in rural areas are different to issues in urban areas. There is so much going on there. I just think that Dr. Lucy Folks is right. Let's talk about the third one really quickly, because I want to give parents some solutions, some practical things that they can do. The last thing that I want to emphasize is that I don't think schools are the right environment for this kind of conversation. I just don't.
I think half of our children's mental health challenges actually are a result of school.
Kind of, yeah. Like there's so many kids that don't feel safe at school because of bullying or because of social insecurity or whatever else. And that means that if you want them to be vulnerable and have a conversation about mental health challenges, it's just inappropriate in a classroom setting where they can't trust their peers.
Yeah.
It just doesn't work. So to me, they're the big three based on what I've read from Dr. Lucy Folks. And because we need to wrap up, our time's done, I just wanted to share a couple of things that parents might do with these things in mind. If you're in a school that's really pushing mental health interventions at a global level for all students, the first thing is that if your child is struggling with mental health, you cannot and should not and ideally will not rely on any kind of a universal school program. If the school says, we've got this universal wellbeing curriculum, that's great, but probably not. Don't rely on that. You need to seek specific and qualified, credentialed help. The second thing is that you're really going to benefit from having conversations at home with your kids and talking with them about what they're going through and helping them to problem solve. While your focus is on solving problems and guiding your children and letting them know, well, this is a stage that you're going through and you can get through this, and building their resilience, you're going to find that you're going to be much more successful. And I think the last thing is just that vulnerable mental health work, when something significant and serious is going on, needs a safe and trusting environment, which may or may not, depending on the school and your child, may or may not exist in a classroom setting. So it's just worth keeping that in mind. I love that high school teachers are now, in most states, in grade 11 and 12, you can take on psychology as a subject. But quite honestly, we could do so much to teach kids about emotions without having a PhD or a clinical psychology degree. There's so much that we could be teaching kids about relationships and about emotions that we're not, and we're packing a whole lot of other stuff into the curriculum that's not helpful. Teachers with the right qualification, the right training, could teach stuff that is not about mental health per se, but is about life skills. And frankly, it would help the teachers as well as helping the students. I wish we were heading down that path instead. Politicians, I've got some ideas. Feel free to reach out. I reckon we could have some valuable and productive conversations. Anyway, that's about it for today. I just wanted to share that as a doctor's desk and flag it. And this is why I don't teach positive psychology much anymore. I really focus on meaningful interventions that work with an emphasis on self-determination theory, which does happen to have the deepest body of research evidence underpinning it of all the psychological theories that exist on the planet, which is why I'm such a fan. If you'd like to know more about the stuff that I think will make your kids happier, visit happyfamilies.com.au and check out the book, The Parenting Revolution. All right, that's about it for today. Tomorrow we step into I'll Do Better Tomorrow and share our wins and losses from the week. The Happy Families podcast is produced by Justin Rowland from Bridge Media. Mim Hammonds provides additional support through admin and research and so on. And if you are a school teacher or if you're somebody who's involved with mental health in schools and you think that this conversation is intriguing and provocative, please share it around. Click the share button and send it to your colleagues and ask them what they think. Or get in touch with us at happyfamilies.com.au. Caroline would love to book me in to come along and do a special session at your school talking about wellbeing for teachers, wellbeing for students, and what we do know that actually works.